In June this year, resilient was the word used by the World Bank to describe Malaysia's economy. However, some 6 months later, in December 2016, have soft export numbers, a plunging ringgit and a confluence of other factors changed its view on the country. I speak to World Bank Senior Economist for Malaysia, Dr. Rafael Muñoz Moreno, to get the latest insights. Hi Dr. Rafael, thank you so much for joining me in this episode of Talking Edge. Now Dr. Rafael, the first question is on Malaysia. Recently, the Federal Open Markets Committee has increased the interest rates in the US, and how is this affecting the whole country, and where does Malaysia stand in terms of economic resilience against all these uncertainties?
I think it's not just how affect just Malaysia, but how it affects the global economy, and that affects Malaysia.
Right.
I think what we have seen is that with the recent elections in the US, we have seen the potential of a deeper and faster fiscal policy being strengthened in the US, and that certainly has been reflected in an acceleration, we could say, of the normalization of the US monetary policy. So interest rates in the US are going to increase faster than we anticipated. Now, this has already have an impact in the global economy. What we have seen is that emerging market financial outflows have moved significantly back to the US. Interest rates have increased worldwide in the US, but also in emerging markets, including Malaysia. And the exchange rate has been depreciated on the currency of emerging markets. Malaysia is not different. Has been, financial outflows taking place, the interest rates or the bonds increasing, and certainly the ringgit has been depreciated. Now, compared to other emerging markets, the impact has been a bit more substantial, but because probably Malaysia is also more financially connected today. So, it's more exposed to this development. So, against this background, what Malaysia can do? Well, probably what it's doing is pretty much let the ringgit absorb these external shocks, and then from the fiscal perspective, probably, keep consolidating the fiscal deficits.
I see, okay. Now, Dr. Rafael, interestingly, in the World Bank Economic Monitor for Malaysia in June 2016, this year, has described the Malaysia's economy as resilient. Do you still hold that view for Malaysia today?
It is certainly very resilient. I mean, you have to put the things into perspective. The country, the economy is being affected by, relatively lower commodity prices, and a slowdown on global trade growth. And, we are seeing the lowest global GDP growth since the 2008 financial crisis. So, and against all these backgrounds, I mean, the economy this year is still expected to grow at 4.2%. So, put things into perspective, this is a relatively large number, considering all the challenges that we see. So, the economy has certainly been resilient, despite the fact that the commodity sectors has been quite affected, they're still growing, providing GDP growth, and this is being also being supported by the manufacturing sector, which is certainly very, very strong. So we see the economy quite resilient.
Right now, for 2017, what is your GDP target for Malaysia?
So for 2017, what we expect is that the economy is going to increase, the GDP growth is going to increase to 4.3%.
Is it still commendable?
It is indeed. It's going to be sustained domestic demand. What we see is that again, private consumption is being very strong, supported by healthy labor market, government income measures, and also the recent interest rate reduction from the Bank Negara, which probably and certainly provide income support to households. So private consumption is going to be still strong, and then what we see is probably an uptick in terms of external demand. But in 3 areas, global growth, global trade growth, and also commodity prices.
Right now, the government is trying to reduce also a budget deficit. Will they be able to meet the target as stated for 2016, and how does it look for 2017?
I think certainly the first semester of the year, the government have a more pro-growth fiscal policy, and I think that the fiscal deficit was a bit wider than anticipated. Ever since, what we have seen is that government has been taking measures from both sides. On the revenue side, they have been increasing the collection, in part because of the payment of dividends by Petronas, but other measures. And on the expenditure side, we have seen them cutting, particularly on the operational side, operational part of the budget. For next year, we see a better prospect. Basically, the idea is that it's achievable And it's going to be pretty much a continuation of the measures that we see, efforts to continue revenue collection, and particularly the containment of the operational expenditures.
I wish I have a crystal ball to know where the ringgit would hit. It's very volatile. Now, the Bank Negara has come up with some measures to support the ringgit. What are other factors that could actually support the ringgit for Malaysia?
I think most of them, to be honest, are external factors.
Right.
So, there are rather limited things that the country can do. I think, the factors that will play a lot of a bigger role are certainly commodity prices, being an exporter, and, the eventual fiscal, particularly I think it's fiscal policy that the new U.S. administration decides to implement. How inflationary, if we want to say, that may be, and how this will affect the U.S. interest rate, the Fed interest rate. So that will have also a huge impact in terms of financial flows and exchange rate depreciation. So these are the factors I will keep an eye on.
A prominent Malaysian economist has criticized the World Bank, saying that they should be, less polite in describing the country's economic environment or the state of the economy. What is the response to this as a lead author of the Malaysia Economic Monitor?
I think, we have to be to disentangle this question. I think on the one hand, we see the current macro environment being very good and responsive to the real challenges that we see. That primarily from the global perspective. I think we cannot shy away of saying the truth, which is, the Malaysian economy is responding well, and actually the Malaysian economy is one of the examples that we are using for other countries, commodity exporters to try to replicate. The fact that the GST has been introduced, the fact that the fuel subsidies have been removed, these are things that are, and the fact that the economy is very diversified, let's be honest, all this is responding and is allowing the economy going relatively smoothly through this current environment. So in short term, the macro is really good. I mean, then we have to put ourselves in the medium to long term, and the government and the country aspirations to be a high-income economy. I think those aspirations are achievable. But we realize over different topics of the Malaysian Economic Monitor that, they require an acceleration of many of the structural reforms,
right.
And this is something that we keep reiterating from the trade perspective, from the labor market perspective, in this case from the productivity perspective. So I think there is where we try to put our emphasis, in the medium-term reform, structural reforms that are going to bring the country to achieve the goals that they have. So I think that is the balanced view that we try to provide in our reports.
In short, the World Bank has always been objective in its assessment of the country.
That is what we try to do, certainly.